Hello, and thank you for joining me at Spooky Reviews. I'm the Ghostess of Christmas Past, and in honor of the holiday season, I'd like to take a look at one of the best slashers of all time, and its increasingly disappointing remakes. Black Christmas is a 1974 film written by Roy Moore and produced and directed by Bob Clark of Christmas Story fame. It is one of the best slasher films of all time, and it inspired John Carpenter to make a holiday horror anthology series that became Halloween. It has a star-studded cast, including Olivia Franco Zeffirelli's Juliet Hussey, Margot Lois Lane Kidder, Keir Open the Pod Bay Doors D'Elia, John Dad from Nightmare on Elm Street Saxon, and Andrea, if you need a character actress to play any sort of white ethnicity, Martin. Black Christmas is also a 2006 film written and directed by Glenn Morgan, who also wrote Final Destination 3 and Jet Li's The One, of all things, that remakes the original's plot to be gorier, grosser, and far more early 2000s slasher, with a cast to match, which includes Michelle, Buffy's little sister Trachtenberg, Lacey, my dad invented toaster strudel Chabert, Mary Elizabeth, also from Final Destination 3 Winstead, and Andrea Martin, this time playing the sorority's den mother. Black Christmas is also a 2019 horror film, produced by Blumhouse, and written and directed by Sophia Takal, whose work I'm honestly not very familiar with. Most of the cast is made up of unrecognizables, but the lead role is played by Imogen Greenroom Poots, with the lead villain played by Carrie, Princess Bride Elwes. It takes on a very heavy plot line with a PG-13 rating, with the director trying to create a modern version of how the original made her feel, only maintaining the setting of a sorority house stalked by killers at Christmas time. I'm not such a horror purist that I don't think a remake can be done effectively. So today I'd like to take a deep dive into the snowbanks and discover once and for all which Black Christmas does it best. Every one of these movies deals with some subjects some viewers might find a little sensitive. Let me throw down some trigger warnings for a few of the following. And like a rich kid at Christmas, these movies are about to be spoiled. You have been warned. Let's begin with The Killer. The 1974 Black Christmas killer is never actually revealed. While one character is heavily red-herringed into being the villain, which I'll touch on later, we know through the depicted circumstances it isn't him, confirmed during the film's ending. Most of their scenes are POV shots, as they break into a sorority house during a holiday party, and voyeuristically watch the sisters within. The audience only sees him in slivers, hands gripping weapons, and only a single eye illuminated in quick glimpses. We hear them breathing heavily, laughing maniacally, raging and wailing, softly singing Little Baby Bunton, and making obscene phone calls throughout the film. The messages start out perverted and somewhat sadistic, which the girls react to comically, as though this sort of anonymous objectification is a commonplace irritance. But as the plot progresses, we get a one-man radio show depicting a disturbing family drama involving two parents scolding their son, Billy, which is also the name the killer uses to refer to himself, and Agnes, a little sister, possible infant, who had an ambiguously inappropriate interaction with her brother. Much of the foul-mouthed phone calls are effectively creepy and nearly incoherent babbling, which no one really takes seriously until a search for a missing sorority sister and a local dead girl get connected to their police report. Since it's the 70s, the calls must be manually traced, with the cops tapping the phone and encouraging Olivia Hussey's character to keep them on the line as long as possible. We're shown the tracing process basically in real time, with the final reveal being what the audience already knows, that the calls are coming from inside the house. I love the threateningly ambiguous ending, with an eerie, silent panning of the house that slowly builds up with the killer's laughter, squeaking footsteps, and soft singing. Phone rings. Credits roll. The unknown nests in our imagination, and fear fills in the gaps, which often means that, in horror movies, the less we know, the better. Many a scary story has been stubbed through over-explaining, and Black Christmas knows exactly what not to say. We never get a motivation behind the killings, but all the clues we do get paint a disturbing portrait. While the 1974 one does a great job playing its hand close to the chest, the 2006 version throws the cards down for all to see and yells, "Hey, look at my cards!" And this was definitely to the movie's detriment. It's clear the writer liked the original Black Christmas, and had their own own idea about who the killer was, spending half the movie spelling out his gross-out backstory in unnecessary detail. Since all we see from the original killer is his eye, this movie makes eyeballs half the character. He pops out his victim's eyeballs in multiple fashions, and his last name is even Lenz. One of their only coherent sentences in the original is, "You're my family now." So the remake has almost every character say this line, whether it makes sense or not. Since this one is set in the age of caller ID, the obscene calls come from the most recent victim's cell phone, including audio of their own demise. In this one, the sorority house is the killer's former house, equipped with people under the stairs styled crawl spaces. They inexplicably make him a yellow bastard with neon jaundiced skin, which is honestly hard to see with the Christmas tree lit scenes. His mother is aggressively abusive without provocation, murdering the sweet father who cares for him, and when he scurries into the walls, she locks him in the attic. When her lover can't get it up one night, she takes a rocking chair ride on her son's lap to make another baby, this one named Agnes. One Christmas, Billy escapes the attic, pops out his sister-daughter's eyeball and eats it, stabs out his stepfather's eye, and cookie cuts his mom's back fat into crispy cannibal keto treats. The Cyclops' sister-daughter is sent to an orphanage, and Billy ends up insane asylum'd until escaping in a Santa costume toward the beginning of the film. But what ho-ho-ho is this? The killer has already plastic-bagged our opening kill by the time the escape occurs, so we know that Billy has an accomplice. The movie red herrings a couple of the other characters to maybe be Agnes, framing one sorority sister repeatedly as the odd one out and juxtaposing her face with the flashbacks. But she ends up headless before this builds up anywhere. Ultimately, she's revealed to be just some other escaped crazy crawling around between the walls and floor. It's less of a twist and more of a, oh, that's it? And it makes me wonder why they didn't make the psycho's daughter-sister assistant one of the sorority girls. It would have at least been more interesting and make all the little moments worth the audience's while. The backstory is needlessly gross. It's like a middle schooler penned creepypasta that aims for shocking and ends up a mockery. Too over the top to be believable, and it totally detracts from the fear. Instead of ending on an unsettling note, with the killer never revealed and still holed up in the attic, we get a couple of different deaths, especially depending on which cut you watch, which ends with a Halloween 2 style chase through a hospital, where Agnes gets defibrillated and Billy is skewered on a Christmas tree. I think the movie would have been far more successful if it kept the backstory to sort of an urban legend level, made one of the sorority sisters the second killer, and concluded with a little bit more ambiguity. The 2019 version is an entirely different vision altogether. Instead of a single killer stalking sorority sisters, this seemingly everywhere-at-once slasher is actually an evil cabal of alpha male frat brothers bent on making the campus women bow to their obvious male superiority. And the movie's big reveal twist is that the college, specifically the founders' fraternity, was built on toxic masculinity. No, but like literally. Like black toxic ooze that turns men into aggressive, woman-claiming cavemen. Okay. So, not only is this so on the nose that you'd go cross-eyed trying to see it, it's an insultingly simplistic explanation that accidentally ends up excusing the villain's behavior. They're not evil because of systemic patriarchy that encourages aggression and domination and treats empathizing with women as a weakness. It's because of frat house goo. They establish that this can infect someone, and once its effects leave the body, they go back to normal. So when the sorority sisters proceed to beat their asses and leave them to die in a frat house fire, they're killing people who could be easily redeemed. Well, I see what it's trying to say. This Goosebumps-level transitive metaphor calls into question the accountability of any of the villain's disgusting actions, which includes both murder and the sexual assaults that the plot centers around. It had me raging at the screen in just what? With this movie seemingly blaming this supernatural element instead of looking to explore its real root causes. And for me, that alone makes it a total fail. But the slasher cliche dictates that our final girl should be the innocent one. Someone virginal enough that they never incur the killer's wrath, but also smart enough to evade their attacks. none of the Black Christmases really put its characters into that small of a box. Characters in the original movie are depicted with a very neutral gaze, and while the killer does make obscenely graphic comments over the phone, he treats Claire's corpse more like a baby, rocking it gently in its attic chair, and speaks to Barb as though she is his little sister. The characters' actions and dialogue demonstrate their intelligence and show them to be grounded, well-rounded, three-dimensional people. Especially the protagonist, Jess, played by Olivia Hussey. Made on the heels of Roe v. Wade being passed in the Supreme Court, this movie has a significant side plot surrounding Jess, telling her boyfriend that she's pregnant.
Jess, that's fantastic.
And planning on having an abortion. Peter reacts to the news...
Oh, Christ, Jess.
Poorly. Maybe her timing to tell him was off, because it was right before a recital he'd been preparing for 3 days straight. While his performance sounds fine to me, his sweaty, angry energy probably freaked the board out, and he demonstrates why the piano is part of the percussion section. Peter sees the fertilized fetus as an extension of himself, and declares Jess not having rights to her own body because of it. When their conversation continues later that night, he calls her selfish for making this decision, while at the same time, Peter swoops in, having decided their future for her, with his plans to drop out of the conservatory so the two of them can get married, as though that's the solution to her problem. Jess stands her ground and eloquently explains her position.
Do you remember when we first met? You told me about you wanting to be a concert pianist, how it was your greatest dream. And I told you about some of the things that I wanted to do. I still want to do those things. You can't ask me to drop everything I've been working for and give up all my ambitions because your plans have changed.
To which Peter replies,
You selfish bitch. You're talking about killing our baby as though you were having a wart removed.
Which the obscene caller later repeats back to her over the phone, casting suspicion on Peter to be the killer. Peter blames her for his anger.
What the hell are you trying to do to me?
Which she replies,
What are you doing to yourself?
Forcing the accountability for his feelings onto himself and reaffirming their individual autonomy. One of the great strengths of Jess's character is that she never backs down from how she feels about the situation, and at every turn affirms that she is not ready to have a child and definitely doesn't want to have one with her current boyfriend. The movie never portrays her as being anything less than responsible and a caring individual, someone willing to arm themselves with a fire poker and head upstairs when she knows there's a killer in the house in hopes she can save one of her sorority sisters. And I find it particularly interesting that they have this character wearing a cross around her neck. She's a person who has Christian values, goal-oriented and ambitious, and planning on having an abortion. Most movies that have unwanted pregnancies don't even act like abortion is an option, and most characters who even consider it end up having a change of heart. It's very rare to even see an argument like Jess's made on film, and in fact uses Peter's rageful reaction to red herring him as a maniac, without ever really pushing him into cartoonish villainy. It's Peter's emotionality that ultimately gets the better of him, as his inability to control the situation, in the same way he was unable to control his fate at the piano recital, causes him to lose control of his anger, and therefore his rationality. Peter later calls crying, begging her not to kill the baby, which throws him under the cops' suspicion as well, especially after they discover his smashed piano. As Jess is fleeing from the killer, Peter breaks into the basement in an effort to confront her, despite the fact she's clearly hiding in terror. Frightened of his relentless approach and demonstrated rage, she's bolstered in her belief that he's the maniac. He continues to approach her even as she cowers with a weapon at the ready, and she bashes in his brains in what she believes to be self-defense, backed up by the police, who also suspect him of being the slasher. Of the non-murderers, the worst character in the 2006 version is probably the lead. She's blonde and bland, with her entire personality wrapped up in the people around her, and no real distinguishing characteristics to herself. This time the lead's boyfriend is an asshole sleaze, whose co-worker posts his secret sex tapes as revenge porn online, including one with another sorority sister who gets got after being lured into the attic by a music box. His character barely makes an impact, and he gets dispatched pretty unceremoniously toward the end. The sisterhood message is a little inconsistent. The girls cut each other down a lot with catty sass whenever possible, but they also also go out of their way to back each other up and take care of each other when it really counts. It's very lip service feminism, with conversations about how we're sisters and that makes us family. It doesn't really aim high enough to let me down, but that can't quite be said about the 2019 version. This movie is about 70% sexual politics and 30% horror movie. The 2019 version came out on the heels of the Me Too movement, and while it clearly wanted to say something important, I'm not quite sure it entirely thought through the message. Center of our plot is Riley, played by the usually adored by me Imogen Poots, who was sexually assaulted by the evil fraternity's former president. Everyone around Riley continues to insist that she's lost her will to fight, but the tell doesn't match the show. She doesn't just walk away when she sees a frat brother attempting a similar assault on her younger sorority sister, standing her ground and refusing to leave, ending the encounter right there. She's the only one who goes to campus security about the missing sorority sisters, and the only one to even attempt reporting the threatening messages they're all receiving, even though the guard is stereotypically dismissive, cutting himself off before actually saying that boys will be boys. There are multiple instances where she stands up for other people, and there are also a couple where she struggles to stand up for herself. And while I think they were trying to give her a best friend that would fight for her, they ended up with Chris, who is leading a crusade against the classical philosophy professor for not representing any queers, women, or people of color. She compares the crusade to Riley's sexual assault, saying that she, of all people, should be happy to stick it to the man. It's not only manipulative, but grossly insults her friend's trauma, which she is more than happy to bring up in conversation, despite it clearly making Riley uncomfortable. Chris encourages Riley to perform at a Christmas pageant in a Mean Girls costumed number with alternative up on the housetop lyrics about frat brothers sexually assaulting women. Chris tells her if she doesn't confront her attacker publicly in a musical number that she isn't a fighter and that she'll keep wilting away. They act like confronting their attackers in a hokey-pokey rhyme scheme is automatically empowering. Chris also posts the performance online, accidentally including a name-dropping accusation that upsets Riley. But Chris defends the action and declares again that this is what empowerment looks like, that her friends did this for her, and states that Riley's unwillingness to publicly point fingers and weaponize what happened to her as disappearing. When Riley wakes up from a nightmare about the attack recurring and ponders whether this was the right way to handle the situation, one of her sisters even says, "Hey, you won," as though calling him out is the same thing as undoing her trauma. The movie continuously portrays Chris's perspective as right, and I think that's a dangerous message to send. It is not for someone else to decide when and where a survivor should discuss their assault. You are not being a good friend by pushing someone else into making a confession and then posting it for the world to see. But a lot of the promotional material tooted its own horn for having the characters finally fight back. What makes it fall a little flat for me, though, is that when Chris storms in at the end to save her friend, she's doing it with a cast of extras, since the rest of their sorority house has basically been killed. But this movie even makes a point of pausing the fight scene at the end so Riley can tell Chris,
"I'm so sorry! You were right! I should have been fighting this whole time! Now's not really the time for I told you so, but I did tell you so!"
It's a super simplified version of empowerment. They keep insisting that this is what fighting back looks like, but her friend's idea of standing up for her by making what happened to her into a public performance, I just found it all to be offensive. The plot was so oversaturated with social commentary. It felt like it was gender pandering with the authenticity of a targeted Twitter ad. While I appreciate that this movie is willing to have that conversation, I wish it hadn't been presented so all or nothing, and had been finessed a little better into a murder plot that didn't ultimately pin the blame on spooky man goop. The heart and soul of any slasher is truly within the slashing itself. A signature weapon is a plus, but you still need variety to keep your audience on their toes and leave them with something they've never seen before. We want murder MacGyvers, able to weaponize anything available with Second City level improvisation. Deaths should be delivered with creativity and flair. And each of these films does that to some degree. The original only has 3 on-screen kills, starting with the innocent Claire, lured by the meows of Claude, the sorority house's cat mascot. who gets asphyxiated with a dry cleaning bag and propped in a rocking chair by the attic window. The film cuts back to her periodically, her final plastic inhale still hauntingly frozen on her gasping face, rocking gently by the glass as those searching for her pass below, with her fate never actually getting discovered. It's the corruption of innocence kill to set a somber tone, and lets us know that our maniac operates without any morality. The next kill is about halfway through. Being the boozy, bawdy den mother of the house, Mrs. Mack has a far more sitcom-y shtick, so it seems only right that she gets a death to match. It's the scene that holds up the least to scrutiny, as the attic is oddly equipped with a rope and pulley, with a hook on the end, that only seems like something you'd have if you wanted a memorable kill in your horror movie. The hook is swung in her direction, she gives a classic horror screech, then her body is hoisted into the air and left hanging. Barb, the sharp-tongued lush of the sisters, faces a far more gruesome fate. What says fragile feminine youth better than a glass unicorn figurine, which the killer uses to stab her to death, repeatedly penetrating her torso with each savage thrust. Read whatever symbology into that as you would like. This also counts as a near-miss kill, as a choir of children Christmas caroling drowns out the sounds of her screams, leaving her dead and bloody while the rest of the girls believe she's still sleeping soundly. The 2006 version, unfortunately, gets very repetitious. There's only so many ways you can pop an eyeball out of its socket. They recreate the plastic bag suffocation scene, ending with an eye gouging, but since it isn't transparent, her being propped up in the window doesn't quite have the same effect. Most of the others are chased down, choked, and enuncleated, to the point that it starts getting a little boring. Its voyeuristic angles rarely match where our murderers would be, and it has far more male-gazy moments, with the killer creeping on one of them in the shower, and then later molesting her while she's in bed, which is distastefully played almost for laughs. The lush gets her eyes stabbed out with a unicorn horn, although this time it's established that the figurine is a gift given to another character because
I know you like the Bible and stuff.
However, it does have a couple of fun kills, done with the ironic juxtaposition that is Christmas horror's bread and butter. The killer escapes the asylum using a sharpened candy cane, and as gross as it was, the cannibal Christmas cookies give me an edgelord grin. I also thought Billy's death was a clear standout, especially that gory shot of his intestines tightening around the Christmas tree as his torso slid down the trunk. Being PG-13, the 2019 one couldn't exactly deliver on what a slasher movie really could be. It helps that the frat boy goo substitutes the boy's blood for MPAA ratings, but even the guys don't get very memorable deaths. They somewhat recreate the asphyxiation kill by having another character head home early for the holidays, get attacked while looking for their sorority house's cat, this time named Claudette because feminism. But there's no dry cleaning bag involved, and it's done much more in the style of The Only Scare in Exorcist 3. The movie mostly forgets about her existence, and I honestly forgot who they were talking about when they reference her again toward the end. There's also a self-sacrificing death, a cliche I have grown to hate, especially in this case because the sisters don't even take advantage of the time she saves them in order to escape, making the whole thing ultimately pointless. I did really like the opening kill, however. A sorority sister Wolverine claws her keys, prepared for the man behind her to be a DM troll, sending her threatening messages, building up the tension quickly, but by the time she turns, he walks in the other direction. When the masked killer attacks, she bangs on the doors of the neighboring houses looking for help. As one of the doors slowly swings open, it's revealed that the killer is on the other side. She's thrown down on the lawn and stabbed in the chest, leaving behind a snow angel as her body is dragged away. I really wish the rest of the kills had been as stylish as this one, as most of them take up very little space in my memory. Let me take a moment to gather my final thoughts. The original is the best. In my opinion, the 1970s one strikes the perfect balance between murder and message, where the 2006 one was way too heavy on the murder and the 2019 one way too heavy on the message. I really don't have anything that I would fix about the original Black Christmas. With the 2006 one, I would have liked them to dial it back on spelling out the backstory, and I think it would have been better if one of the sorority sisters had actually been the accomplice. But like I was saying before, I get sort of a middle school edgelord kind of thrill from the 2006 one. The 2019 one has so many good elements going for it. It's shot well, it's stylish, the cast is pretty good. It's just that the rest of the movie felt like such a sludge. Too on the nose and not enough fun. It would have to be stripped down so much it's barely even a movie for me to fix it. Each version of Black Christmas is very reflective of the times in which it was made, especially when it comes to its gender politics and overall messaging. The 2006 one falls under that harmlessly dumb umbrella. And while the 2019 one is definitely smarter, it just ends up getting under my skin. The original is the most successful in how it delivers its message, how it scares its audience, and how creatively it dispatches its characters. And while I wouldn't really recommend either of the other two, they do still have their merits, even if they are few and far between. Thank you to everybody still watching. I know this was a long one and it took me a little longer to make, but I appreciate any eyes that end up on it. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. Let me know in the comments below how you feel about the 3 Black Christmases, and join me next time for another spooky review. Happy holidays, and boo for now! What do you want? What's up? You want to go down? Yeah?